Welcome to a Prismivision mini-documentary on unidentified aerial phenomena. This video will start by covering UAPs in the past up to World War II. We will look at a few of the more prominent incidents like in Brazil in 1986 or Phoenix in 1997. Then we will look at the modern UAP situation where military data affirms what people have been reporting for decades. But the issue with disclosure is deeper than evidence. We examine the issue by looking at how Immaculate Constellation is thought to work. Lastly, we go through the three prevalent theories regarding the nature of UAPs, the extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and cryptoterrestrial hypotheses.
For 60 years, we've pointed radio telescopes at distant star systems, hoping to catch a faint signal from another civilization. But while we've been scanning the cosmic horizon, we've largely ignored the possibility that something unknown has been sharing our own skies for millennia. We've spent decades analyzing radio frequencies and cataloging distant anomalies to find proof of life out there. Yet terrestrial history is packed with physical encounters. In 74 BCE, as a Roman army prepared to fight the forces of King Mithridates in Phrygia, a glowing silver object shaped like a wine jar plummeted between the two armies. The sight was so commanding that both sides halted a major war. Fast forward to April 1561. Residents of Nuremberg, Germany, woke up to a dawn sky filled with hundreds of metallic spheres and cylinders, engaging in an aerial battle, darting erratically before falling to the earth in clouds of smoke. For centuries, human eyewitness testimony was our only recording medium. Because people lacked objective instruments, they filtered these physical anomalies through the vocabulary of their time, recording them as religious omens or strange weather. The 20th century industrialized our skies. We filled the air with advanced machinery and highly trained pilots to fly it. During the later years of World War II, Allied pilots began reporting glowing, highly maneuverable orbs tracking their planes over the Rhine Valley. They called them Foo Fighters. These objects paced bombers in tight formation, exhibited intelligent control, and then vanished without leaving a trace. The pattern continued in 1946 over Scandinavia. Thousands of people watched wingless, rocket-like objects streak overhead and crash into lakes. The Swedish military mobilized engineering troops to dredge the water, expecting to find experimental foreign missiles. They found absolutely zero physical debris. Time and again, the outcome was the same. Even when the witnesses were highly trained military personnel operating cutting-edge aircraft, their accounts were easily dismissed because human memory cannot substitute for hard physical evidence. That dynamic shifted completely with the invention of the camera. Suddenly, observers had a tool to capture objective data. Anomalies could finally leave a physical, verifiable trace on silver halide film. In 1958, 48 crewmen aboard a Brazilian Navy research vessel near Trindade Island watched a Saturn-shaped disk bank overhead. The ship's photographer managed to capture 4 clear, sequential frames of the object in flight. This diagram shows a geometric analysis of those Trindade photographs. When modern physicists measure the disk's profile, they find the central dome leans to one side, while the leading edge is asymmetrically compressed compared to the trailing edge. We see a similar physical footprint in the 1965 Rex Heflin photographs. Taken in Santa Ana, California, this Polaroid sequence shows another distinct disk, but it is the third photograph in the sequence that contains a specific telltale anomaly. This animation illustrates the concept of warp field oscillation blur. The Heflin photograph captured a double exposure effect on the object itself, while the background remained perfectly sharp. The craft appears to be rapidly shifting back and forth between two discrete spatial positions. Modern relativistic field theory predicts exactly this behavior. A propulsion system manipulating local spacetime through pulsed fields would create a localized gravitational lensing effect, rendering an oscillating blurred boundary condition exactly like the one caught on the film. A mid-century hoaxer couldn't have faked these specific optical distortions. To forge them, a photographer in 1958 or 1965 would have needed a working understanding of space-time manipulation and warp metric mathematics that human physicists wouldn't conceptualize for another 30 years.
On the evening of May 19, 1986, flight operations over Brazil followed their usual quiet patterns. At 8:15 p.m., Sergio Volta da Silva, an air traffic controller at São José dos Campos Airport, spotted 3 luminous objects. He watched through binoculars as they hovered near the airport, shifting colors from red to yellow and orange. This wasn't an isolated visual sighting. Radar operators at Guarulhos International Airport soon picked up the same targets, confirming the report with hard telemetry data. The event gained further credibility when Colonel Ozire Silva, the founder of Embraer, spotted the objects from his own aircraft. He described them as big red stars appearing in the night sky. Silva decided to divert from his flight path to investigate, but even at full cruise, he was unable to close the distance to the lights. By 9:39 p.m., military bases at Santa Cruz and Anápolis were picking up their own radar echoes, prompting the Brazilian Air Force to move to a high state of alert. The situation had shifted from a local curiosity to a multi-state security concern, verified by both civilian witnesses and ground-based radar. The Air Force responded by scrambling 5 tactical jets, including F-5Es and supersonic Mirages, to intercept the unknown targets. One F-5E pilot established visual contact with a white light and began a pursuit, following the object as it climbed steadily to 33,000 feet. The object maintained a precise 10 to 12-mile gap, mirroring the jet's every move until the pilot reached his fuel limit and had to break off. A Mirage interceptor had better luck with its radar, managing to close within just 2 miles of one of the contacts. As the jet moved in, the object demonstrated impossible evasion. It performed sudden 90-degree turns that would subject conventional airframes to catastrophic G-forces. This chart compares the Mirage's top speed against the target. Despite the interceptor's capabilities, the object accelerated away at Mach 15. The objects weren't just evading, they were showcasing flight characteristics that exceeded the known limits of human technology. A second F-5E pilot joined the chase, picking up a bright red object on both his visual and his onboard radar. As he tried to close in for a better look, the light simply went out, and his radar lost its lock simultaneously. Seconds later, ground control issued a warning. 13 new radar plots appeared on their screens, positioned directly behind the F-5E in pursuit formation. The pilot pulled a 180-degree turn to face the targets. The moment he completed the maneuver, all 13 plots bashed. The timing of these movements suggests the objects were acting with situational awareness, positioning themselves in relation to the pirates' tactical maneuvers. Just 4 days after the sightings, the Minister of the Air Force took the unusual step of calling a national press conference. Alongside his pilots, he confirmed that the military had spent the night chasing 21 unidentifiable objects that demonstrated high-performance flight capabilities. The details remained tucked away in the Air Force's official investigation, Relatório Embraer 008, which wasn't declassified for over 2 decades. The document's conclusions are blunt. It states the phenomena were physically solid and reflected intelligence based on their ability to fly in formation and maintain distance from observers. This dashboard summarizes the metrics confirmed by the FAB dossier. These objects could hover, operate at altitudes up to 40,000 feet, and accelerate to Mach 15 while performing 90-degree turns. The 1986 incident remains a landmark case because it is built on multi-sensor correlation. When civilian witnesses, ground radar, and military interceptors all record the same data, the event moves from a collection of stories to a documented historical record.
On the evening of March 13, 1997, 911 dispatch centers across Arizona were suddenly overwhelmed. Phone lines lit up with frantic callers from across the desert, all trying to report the exact same thing. This map highlights the geographic scale of the anomaly. Over the course of a few hours, up to 10,000 people across a 300-mile corridor, stretching from Henderson, Nevada, all the way down to Tucson, stepped outside and looked up. Witnesses described a massive, solid geometric shape drifting slowly overhead. It was so large and so dark that observers couldn't see the craft itself. They could only see a vast, empty silhouette completely eclipsing the stars in its path. If you are familiar with this event, you have probably seen this footage, a string of glowing orange orbs hovering in the night sky. The video played on constant rotation across national media, and the United States military eventually identified the lights as a specific training exercise. But despite the military closing the book on the incident, thousands of witnesses on the ground, including the governor of Arizona, insisted the official explanation was entirely wrong. The reason this mystery endures is because the public and the media accidentally combined two completely separate events. The world focused on the video of the glowing orbs, but the people on the ground experienced a separate phenomenon. Looking at this timeline and map, we can track the exact trajectory of what we will call Phase 1. Between 7:30 and 9 p.m., observers watched a distinct anomaly drift southeast from the Nevada border directly through the Phoenix metro area. People looking up during this 90-minute window described a solid, dark gray V-shaped craft. Witnesses consistently estimated it to be a mile or two wide, roughly the size of a city, gliding by at what some described as a walking speed. The most alarming detail was the acoustics. Any conventional aircraft flying that low and that large would generate a roar, yet virtually every person who saw the V-shape reported absolute haunting silence. Trained observers were also tracking the anomaly. Actor and private pilot Kurt Russell was in the air that night, on final approach into Phoenix when he radioed air traffic control to report a series of unidentified lights. When Russell made that call, the controllers checked their glowing green scopes. Despite the object being large enough to block out the sky, air traffic control registered exactly 0 radar returns. Phase 1 was defined by a physical contradiction. Highly trained observers and thousands of civilians reported a radar-invisible, completely silent craft large enough to cover entire neighborhoods, flying directly over a major metropolitan area. Then came Phase 2. At 10 p.m., a full hour after the V-shape vanished toward the Mexican border, a distinct row of bright lights appeared behind the Sierra Estrella Mountains southwest of Phoenix. This is the event captured on nearly all the famous home camcorder footage. When the military issued its official explanation for the night's events, they pointed directly to Operation Snowbird. This was a scheduled winter training mission flying out of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, utilizing a fleet of A-10 Thunderbolt II fighter jets. According to the Maryland Air National Guard, the glowing orbs caught on tape at 10 p.m. were LU-2B by B illumination flares, dropped by those A-10s during a routine exercise over the Barry Goldwater bombing range. This elevation diagram illustrates how the physics of that explanation match the camcorder footage. As the slow-burning flares descended on their parachutes, they dropped behind the mountain peaks one by one, creating the exact optical illusion of a hovering spacecraft slowly turning off its lights. But when we apply that exact same A-10 explanation to the events of Phase 1, the logic falls apart. A formation of 5 fighter jets flying at low altitude over a city produces a massive decibel footprint. This contradicts the absolute silence reported by thousands of people on the ground. There is also a structural discrepancy. 5 individual airplanes flying in a formation have open airspace between them. They cannot physically block out a background star field as a single, continuous, solid silhouette. The official military response accounts for the video footage of the flares, but it fails to explain the scale, the physical structure, and the silence of the massive boomerang craft seen earlier that evening. In the immediate aftermath, the political response focused on crowd control. Arizona Governor Fife Symington held a publicized press conference where he brought out an aide in an alien costume, mocking the event to diffuse public concern. Years later, Symington recanted that performance. He admitted the press conference was a calculated move to keep order and confessed that he had personally witnessed the craft that night, describing it on the record as otherworldly. This data visualization maps out exactly why this event is so unusually compelling. This was a mass observation corroborated by police officers, doctors, commercial pilots, and politicians, all reporting the exact same physical details from different geographic vantage points. The Phoenix Lights serve as a definitive case study in the friction between official government documentation and collective human experience. The thousands of people who stepped outside that night know exactly what they saw, regardless of the official paperwork. Ultimately, an official explanation can be entirely factual regarding one half of an incident, while leaving the primary anomaly completely unsolved.
The military certainly dropped flares over the desert, but the massive, silent shadow that glided across Arizona remains one of the great aerial mysteries of our time. Today, human observation is no longer the primary filter. We track our airspace using infallible digital multi-sensor military arrays that do not suffer from fatigue or optical illusions. In 2004, the USS Nimitz strike group tracked a 40-foot smooth cylinder, dubbed the Tic-Tac, executing maneuvers that defy known physics. Radar operators watched the object drop from 28,000 feet down to sea level in exactly 0.78 seconds. This chart maps the sheer physical force of the Nimitz drop. By tracking that 28,000-foot descent over less than a second, we calculate an acceleration generating over 5,000 Gs. No human-engineered airframe can withstand that force without catastrophic structural failure. The craft actively split and delayed the incoming pulses from the Navy's radar systems. This indicates the object was enveloped in a localized space-time distortion that bent the electromagnetic waves around it, rather than reflecting a signal off a standard aerodynamic hull. We see identical mastery over physical mediums in the 2013 Aguadilla thermal video. Homeland Security cameras tracked a craft plunging into the ocean at 110 miles per hour, then continuing its flight underwater at 85 miles per hour. It produced zero splash, zero debris, and no hot exhaust plume. These modern military sensors provide high-fidelity data on flight characteristics that mirror the historical accounts. By confirming the physical reality of these maneuvers today, we are forced to re-examine the consistency of what human eyes have reported for centuries. To quantify this technology, defense analysts have established a scientific framework to categorize these physics-defying flight characteristics. They call them the 5 observables. This list visualizes the 5 key observables. Number 1 is positive lift without conventional flight surfaces, and number 2 is instantaneous acceleration. These are the exact metrics we recorded during the Aguadilla hover and the 5,000 G Nimitz drop. Number 3 is hypersonic velocity without signatures. The object moves at extreme speeds without producing a heat plume or a sonic boom, matching the exact behavior of the Foo Fighters pacing Allied bombers. Number 4 is transmedium travel, the ability to seamlessly transition from the vacuum of space through the atmosphere and into the ocean without slowing down, the exact behavior witnessed during the 1946 ghost rockets phenomenon. And number 5 is low observability, the capability to evade or distort radar, matching the signal delays tracked by the USS Nimitz. The United States intelligence apparatus officially acknowledges this reality. A 2021 preliminary assessment reviewed 144 military encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, and they could only explain one of them. The remaining 143 represent physical objects demonstrating advanced technical capabilities. The convergence of historical accounts, early photography, and modern multi-sensor data points to a persistent, physics-defying phenomenon. We are looking at evidence of dark operational warp technologies, leaving the investigation to focus on the intelligence behind the controls. Imagine an F-22 on patrol, suddenly boxed in by a formation of glowing orbs. The pilot attempts a rapid evasive barrel roll, but the objects mirror the jet perfectly, maintaining a rigid spatial relationship through every high-speed maneuver. Military records indicate these events are captured across multiple advanced sensor platforms simultaneously, utilizing infrared arrays, long-range radar, and full-motion video. When unknown craft demonstrate this level of impunity in secure airspace, protocol mandates immediate high-level briefings for the congressional committees responsible for national security. Instead, this is the intelligence delivered to lawmakers. Under the header Pilot Reporting, a single B1 classification code replaces the entire description. This pattern repeats across hundreds of reports. The military intelligence enterprise is actively scrubbed of technical data before reaching congressional investigators. While whistleblowers testify to the existence of high-definition imagery, the internal reporting process ensures that the evidence is stripped away, leaving Congress with a trail of empty files. Curious, leaning in, if the raw sensor data from those F-22 encounters is being diverted away from oversight committees, we have to look at where those servers actually lead. This diversion leads into unacknowledged special access programs, or USAPs, security compartments so restricted that their very existence is a classified secret. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the Department of Defense is legally required to notify the Gang of Eight in Congress about the existence of every classified program. Whistleblowers claim a specific loophole allows the executive branch to bypass these laws. By directing the Pentagon to run a program under a White House-level mandate, they can effectively hide the data from standard DoD reporting requirements. This secretive parent program, reportedly called Immaculate Constellation, serves as a central hub, consolidating observations from military platforms. Its primary function is to quarantine and transfer high-quality UAP imagery into a closed loop, removing it from the broader intelligence enterprise before it can circulate. This creates a reality where the military's most verifiable data on global airspace incursions is intentionally isolated from the constitutional oversight meant to govern it. While the internal pipeline is highly automated, the public-facing side of the government maintains a different kind of barrier, the wall of bureaucratic denial. Researchers use the Freedom of Information Act to chase these records, but this Navy response shows the typical outcome: redirection to reading rooms with gutted files. Once the director signs these denials, the legal process effectively ends. Investigators point to the Pentagon's official UAP office, AARO, as the latest evolution of this wall, accusing it of acting as a shield to dismiss whistleblowers rather than a tool to find the truth. This follows a playbook established by the CIA as far back as 1953, where expert panels were used to publicly discredit sightings and build a facade of ridicule around the phenomenon. This synchronized cycle of FOIA denials and public dismissals provides the necessary cover for the internal quarantine of UAP data. This transition moves the focus back to the U.S. Capitol, where the debate has shifted from aerial anomalies to the fundamentals of domestic law. There is a growing bipartisan concern among Intelligence Committee members that elements within the security state are operating as a rogue entity, shielded from the lawmakers who fund them. The existence of a hidden intelligence program like Immaculate Constellation suggests a scale of concealment that bypasses the constitutional authority of Congress. In response, leaders are pushing for the UAP Disclosure Act, a legislative attempt to seize recovered materials and bypass the redaction pipeline by establishing an independent review board. Democracy relies on the transparency of information. Until Congress can breach the redaction trail and inspect the military's most secretive severs, the truth behind these incursions will remain buried in the dark. Modern investigations into unidentified phenomena began in June 1947, when pilot Kenneth Arnold witnessed 9 silver disc-like objects skipping across the Pacific Northwest skyline at supersonic speeds. Recognizing a potential national security threat, the U.S. military immediately began documenting these events. This transitioned the subject from fringe folklore into the realm of classified intelligence, with intelligence officials providing sworn testimony on anomalous craft and non-human materials. As this subject enters mainstream discourse, it remains anchored in a single assumption, that if these objects are real, they must be nuts-and-bolts spaceships piloted by beings from other star systems. This narrow focus creates an epistemological trap. By filtering all evidence through the space visitor lens, researchers often discard any data that contradicts that specific cultural narrative. Escaping that trap requires a rigorous taxonomy. We must map the observational data against 3 distinct frameworks: the extraterrestrial, the interdimensional, and the cryptoterrestrial hypotheses. Objective analysis demands that we set aside our cultural biases and evaluate the phenomenon against all 3 models simultaneously. The extraterrestrial hypothesis, or ETH, proposes that UAPs are physical craft controlled by non-human intelligence originating from other planets. This was the military's primary working theory in 1948. Investigators within the Air Force's Project Sign drafted an estimate of the situation, concluding the craft were extraterrestrial, though the report was famously rejected and destroyed by General Hoyt Vandenberg. Following official military dismissals, civilian researchers like Donald Kehoe popularized the theory. They framed the phenomenon as a literal flying saucer invasion being withheld from the public by a government cover-up. Scientifically, the ETH faces a massive hurdle known as the Fermi paradox. In a universe billions of years old, containing trillions of star systems, the paradox asks why we haven't detected radio signals or witnessed overt, undeniable alien contact. Modern researchers address this silence through the dual goals hypothesis. This model assumes any advanced intelligence shares a primary goal, self-preservation in a hostile galaxy. The second goal is information acquisition. They secure their position by deploying stealth points to monitor rivals on inhabited planets, maintaining strict operational security, observing our technological progress without revealing their presence. In the dual goals framework, the elusive nature of UAPs is not evidence of their absence. It is evidence of a highly successful covert surveillance operation. However, the extraterrestrial model fails to explain the thousands of reports involving high strangeness, encounters that involve physical absurdities and paradoxical behavior. This led astronomer Jacques Vallée to argue that the data contradicts the logic of a simple scientific space mission. Vallée developed 5 primary arguments demonstrating why the space traveler narrative is insufficient. First is event frequency. Thousands of recorded close encounters overflow the requirements for a planetary survey. Second is biological incongruity. The reported aliens are overwhelmingly humanoid, making an independent evolutionary path improbable. Third is historical depth. Similar phenomena have been documented for centuries. This forms the basis of the interdimensional hypothesis, or IDH. It proposes that these intelligences exist in parallel realities or dimensions that occupy the same physical space we do. Rather than traversing the vacuum of space, these entities cross the dimensional membrane that separates their reality from ours. Vallée views the phenomenon as a control system, a socio-cultural mechanism that regulates human belief systems over long periods. To maintain this control, the phenomenon adopts the scenery of the current era, appearing as fairies or spirits to pre-industrial societies and as advanced spacecraft to the modern world. The IDH recasts UAPs as a permanent, coexisting system that manipulates human consciousness from just outside our perceptive reality. In modern encounters, objects are observed dropping from the sky and piercing the ocean surface at high speed, without causing a splash or wake. This leads to the Cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, which suggests that the intelligence behind UAPs is indigenous to Earth. This model applies the principle of geographic parsimony. It is far simpler to assume a phenomenon originates here on Earth than to assume it has traveled trillions of miles from another star. It posits the existence of an advanced sister race or breakaway civilization sharing the planet with us in total concealment. Military reports increasingly focus on unidentified submerged objects, or USOs, which frequently display these capabilities. Navy sensors and witnesses often document objects operating with impunity around carrier strike groups, diving into and emerging from the ocean without losing velocity. This topographic depth chart shows that the deep ocean remains largely unexplored. Its abyssal and Haddle zones provide a massive, impenetrable environment for a terrestrial-bound intelligence to remain hidden. Under the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, our greatest blind spot is looking to the stars, while an advanced intelligence remains concealed beneath the waves. The extraterrestrial, interdimensional, and cryptoterrestrial hypotheses offer 3 very different origins for the phenomenon. But regardless of where they come from, we must account for exactly how they operate within our physical reality. All 3 models share a set of observed anomalies, like instantaneous acceleration, seamless transmedium travel, and complete optical cloaking. Executing these maneuvers requires a technology that manipulates the local fabric of space-time itself, a mechanism called space-time metric engineering. These craft do not use standard propulsion. Instead, they generate a spherical warp bubble, creating geometric distortions in the space-time grid around them. This is known as a dual-sheet model. By generating this localized bubble, the craft detaches from the surrounding environment, insulating itself from atmospheric friction and local gravity. This localized bubble disconnects the object from inertia. It can make right-angle turns at hypersonic speeds and accelerate instantly without causing a sonic boom or disturbing the surrounding air and water. Understanding these physics requires mainstream science and defense agencies to move past decades of official stigma. Scientific rigor demands we abandon outdated paradigms and face a reality that appears significantly more complex than our cultural models suggest. UAP analysis serves as an empirical demand for epistemic humility. It requires us to redefine the current limits of physics and reevaluate humanity's place within the universe.